Hi, this is a continuation of Intro to Spreadsheets Part 1. We'll call it Intro to Spreadsheets Part 1B. In the previous video, we talked about what spreadsheets are, saw how to write some simple formulas and to fill. In this one, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the difference between absolute and relative references. We're going to look at data formatting so that you can take advantage of all of a spreadsheet program's features. And I'll give you a couple of tips that you can use to just make the process of using the spreadsheet a little bit better. Okay, in talking about absolute versus relative references, I'm going to use an example of giving directions, and we'll just say to Phoenixville Hospital. So one option would be an absolute reference in terms of the directions, and to do that I would just simply say it's at 140 Nut Road, Phoenixville, PA 19460. That will always be the same place. So I'm referring to a particular spot in the universe. That doesn't necessarily help you get there from where you are right now, but it is an exact location and it will always be at that place. Another way that I could give you directions to a place would be a relative reference. So I could say, let's say we're at the school sitting in my classroom, I could say go 5 blocks to your left. It's easy. However, it only works from that specific starting point. If you were to go out to San Francisco and follow these directions, go 5 blocks to your left, it's not going to get you to Phoenixville Hospital. Whereas if you go to 140 Nut Road, Phoenixville, PA 19460, it will be Phoenixville Hospital. So Excel uses both of these types of references in determining which cell it's supposed to be looking at. By default, it uses relative references. And so in this screenshot, you can see in column B, row 2, I have set it equal to A2. What that actually means to Excel is set this cell's value equal to the value of the cell one column to the left. So we're going to set the value of this cell. It doesn't care that it's in B2, to be honest. That's not how it's thinking about this rule, okay, this equation. This equation tells it, set the value of this cell equal to the value of the cell one column to the left. Why it's important to understand this is because if you want to use that equation for other things, it has implications for how it plays out. So if you copy this formula to another cell, it doesn't copy equals A2. It copies the statement, set the value of this new cell equal to the value of the cell one column to the left. That's what it's going to do. So if we go over to Excel, one of the things that you'll notice here is I had originally set this one equal to 2 times A2 plus 3. What this literally says is set the value of the cell equal to 2 times the value of the cell one column to the left plus 3. And if I copy and paste it into the cell below that, it doesn't care that it was A2 originally. It now is going to look for the column 1 to the left. Here we can see we're in the 4th row. It's going to go 1 column to the left to get that value out. When I did these ones, it shifts over by a column each time, right? So I started in column B looking at column A. Now I'm in column C looking at column B, in column D looking at column C, and so on. This is a very useful feature to have for Excel because now you can use the same formula over and over again for different values. However, there might be some times when you want to refer to the same cell even no matter what you might do. And if you copy and paste, you want to always use that same cell to get a particular value out. To get Excel to look at a particular cell and not a relative reference from the cell that you're starting in, you need to use money signs. And so you can see here in this example, I did the $A, $2, and now Excel knows that I really want it to just look at cell A2. I don't want to look at the cell 3 columns to the left. I want to look at A2. There's sometimes when you'll only use $1 sign, one when you'll use it for the column, one when you can use it for the row. You'll actually see an example of that in a future video. I'll use that feature. But for now, if you want to lock in a particular cell, you need to make sure that you're using a $sign in front of the A and in front of the 2, in front of the column and in front of the row. I just want to briefly show you what that looks like in an actual spreadsheet. So I set this up where I'm referring to just the cell times the cell one column to the left. So this is an absolute reference. This is a relative reference. So if I, oops. So if I fill down, what you'll notice is that it's constantly updating the row for the one to the left, C6, C5, and so on, but it's keeping this locked into that one cell. Now there is an alternative that you can use instead of using an absolute reference, and I'll show you an example of that, but it basically comes down to making a full column with just the particular value in it. And here's what I mean. So I just made a speed column and I set the value equal to 2. Now what you want to do actually is you don't want to just write 2 in each case, because what if you decide, you know what, let me see what happens when I change the speed to 3. You want to make sure that all of the other cells below are going to be the same value. So what I did here was I set the initial value and then I set all of the other ones using a relative reference equal to the same thing. And so now if I change this, everything changes. So that's an alternative to just locking it in here, and I change this value and everything changes correspondingly. Okay, a couple of notes on how to format the data so that Excel uses it most efficiently. You want to make your factors, your variables, whatever you want to call them, you want to make those as columns. So for instance, speed was one column, time was another column, position was another column. By default, Excel assumes that that's how you formatted it, so it'll make things like graphing easier if you do it in that way. It's also the way that most people set things up outside of education. So I've seen lots of students start off making their factors rows, but you don't want to do that. You want to make your factors or your variables the columns. And this is just showing what I mean by that. Okay, you can see that we've got the speed, time, position as column headings, and the instances of those are in the rows below. And there we can see that I have the first time is in the first row under the time heading, and then the second time is the next row, third time the next row, and so on. So your data go by row, and your factors, your variables go by column. Another important thing to bear in mind is that your units need to be in the column headings. If you put them elsewhere, so here you can see that I put the seconds in with the times, and it doesn't matter, I left a space in some of them, I didn't leave a space in some of the other ones. It no longer sees that as a number, it sees it as text. And when you can see the position column was the speed times the time. If I multiply those things together, it's taking 2 times some text and it doesn't know what to do, and so it tells you it doesn't know what you're doing here. You have the wrong data type. So make sure you don't do that. If you put units in with the numbers, you are basically completely wiping out the usefulness of using Excel because you can't use it to do the calculations. Okay, a couple of quick tips, and then we'll finish this up. I'm going to show you how you can change the data type or the number of decimal spaces. I'm also going to show you very briefly how to sort. I'm going to show you the information at the bottom of the screen, which can sometimes be useful, that you can access. And I'm going to show you how to freeze the panes, which will make scrolling in large data sets easier. Okay, so the first thing is I've got this number here. It's too big. I don't want to see it like that, so I'm going to go to the Home tab. And you can see we have General here. I can just change this to number, and it automatically just shortens it. It's still the same amount, but it just shows it as less. And if I want more decimal places or fewer decimal places, I can just click these buttons here actually. Okay, so that's one quick tip. Okay, here I have a bunch of different data columns, and what I want to do is I want to sort these so that the largest numbers are at the top for feature B first, and then if there's any ties, I'm going to look at feature A to try to separate those ties, and then I'm going to look at feature C. So I can actually highlight the entire column by just clicking on the column heading, and that can be useful for just cutting down on a little bit of time. And then we can go to, where is it, sort. So you can do a quick sort, and that's just going to sort from smallest to largest or largest to smallest for a single row or a single column. Here, and this is another reason, by the way, that you want to orient things in columns, because the sort by default works on columns. So up pops this screen when I hit the sort button, and I click this box here, my data has headers. If I take this off, you can see it's now including the headering for the columns as part of the columns. I don't want that, so I'll keep this clicked. And I want to sort by 3 different things. So I just hit add level. I'm going to sort first by B from largest to smallest. Then I'm going to sort by A from largest to smallest. And then I can sort by C, largest to smallest as well. Smallest to largest, doesn't really matter in this case. And there's all sorts of other things that you can do depending on what is part of that cell. But then I hit OK, and it sorts, and you can see that it's sorted by B, and then by A, and then by C when there was a tie in those cases. Okay, I'm going to draw your attention to this part of the screen down here at the very bottom. If I highlight cells, select cells, you'll notice that it's giving us a couple of useful bits of information. One of those is the average, the other one is the count of the number of cells that you've selected, and the other one is the sum. This is really just a quick way of seeing some information about your data as a whole if you don't want to necessarily write in some formulas, which I'll show you in the next section, for how you can actually just calculate these things. But it can be a quick and effective way of just getting an idea of what your data is like by looking at the average, the count, and the sum. Now, another possibility is that your data set is quite large and you can't fit it all on one screen. It also doesn't help in this case that my screen is super small. But what you can do, because if I scroll down, now maybe I can't tell which column is which has feature A in it, which has feature B in it. So what you can do is you can go to View, and here there's something called Freeze Panes, and you can select what you want to do here. I can show you that a little bit more at some other point in time. But here I'm just going to freeze the top row, and here the top row freezes. If there's something useful and interesting in, say, the first column and the first rows, what you can do is you can select the next thing over, and I'll unfreeze first, and hit just Freeze Panes, and now it's going to freeze both the first column and the first row, so that we can see the column headings and, if we have them, row headings as well. Okay, that's it. I'm sorry it ran a little bit longer than I would have liked it to. Next video, what we're going to do is look at some of the built-in basic arithmetic and stat functions, and we'll look at conditional statements, and we'll look at conditional formatting of the cells.